Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hey friend, I already told you what I wanted to talk about. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. Basically, how long the honeymoon phase should last in new employees. Is that right?
Yeah, and kind of like, I feel like and you too, you say like you try to, like you're the last person to want to fire.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm the last person to want to fire because I like try to repurpose, and you're like, the CPR is like, call it. Like, and I'm still like, no, I'm going to keep going. One more shock, right? Because I'm really like, we spent so much time and I hired this person for a reason. There's got to be some redeeming thing about they're just not on the right seat. They're in the right bus. Yeah. But determining when it's time to get them off the bus, I feel like I really struggle with. And I would say more often than not, if I look back, I probably let them linger on the bus too long.
Yeah.
And so if you could help us give some feedback. I know even a dear friend of mine reached out to me last week and was like, you know, this person, we've been chugging along for a year and a half, and I finally was just like, you gotta go. And so for me, for her having said that, I'm like, I wonder if she could even go back and track and trace and go, should it have been month 6? Has she just been dealing with BS for all these months? Or do we fool ourselves into going, oh, things are going to get better, or one or two things do get better? Or, you know what, but it'll get better because we're about to switch insurance or software, or it's going to get better because we're about to drop that insurance, or it's going to get better because, and so do we tap dance around all of that and kind of fool ourselves? Or is it the opposite, where we really maybe should have stuck it out a little bit longer, but then we're firing at month 2, we're firing at 40 days, at 4 days, and it's like we just can't keep somebody in. So on both ends of the extreme, my question to you is, because again, I'm about to embark on this right now, where we've hired some people that have good histories from where the offices they've come from, but does that mean they're going to click in my office?
Right.
And so so last week's episode was like, how do I integrate them with my team? But hand in hand with that goes, how long do I give it? What are the factors I look at to go, okay, you need to get off my bus before you cause other people to leave the bus at the next stop? Do you have any tips for us on those types of dynamics?
Yeah, and it really is. I think you've brought up the balance in it all. We can't give up too quickly, but we also can't hang on too long. So there is a balance to it, and a lot of times we approach that from a feeling standpoint because our feelings are wrapped into it at some point, and I think we've got to have some logic that's built into it. So,
well, and I would say either feelings behind it or desperation, if you will.
Yeah,
like maybe you're like, this is all I've got right now, or we've been through every other candidate. Now what am I going to do? And so you're kind of like, I'm just stuck here. But then you hire somebody else and you don't know if the original person is going to chase that person away, or if you fire original person and now new person's like, oh, that's just what you do. So next time, like, how do you finesse your way through this?
Yeah.
Super clunk thing that most of us clunk our way through.
Well, and clunk your way through, but also these decisions are being made in the midst of life. You know, not only your personal life, but then the everyday life of running a practice and caring for patients. And so sometimes these decisions can feel overwhelming. So we either avoid making that decision because our brain is going, okay, what's the aftermath of this decision? And do I have the energy to even deal with that right now? Or do I have the energy to try to hire somebody new now? So it really can be an exhausting choice to make. But we do have to strike the balance, because I've been in so many practices where the employee was kept too long. And now it's reached a point where the team that the doctor wants to keep is exhausted by this person. and now we're at risk of losing other people. And so we have to strike that balance of calling it quits when it needs to be called quits and knowing when to call it quits. So I think there's a few elements that we need to talk about here, which is, number one, have we actually given this person the support that they need? So what do I mean by the support that they need? So when we're spotting deficiencies in their performance, in their personality, in their role and what they're doing, have we actually addressed that? And if so, how many times have we addressed that? And have we addressed it in the right way? So when they're faltering or not upholding the standards that we've given them, we need to have a one-on-one conversation that's documented and clearly says what you're looking for. You cannot use ambiguous things like, you just got to get better with patient communication. That means nothing to anybody. This makes me think of the article that you wrote for our June, actually it's going to be our July digest, that talks about different perspectives. White, the same white is not the same. This color white that's on these walls in here is a different white than is on the white down at the other house on our property. So you have to be clear. Don't just say you need to improve in patient communication, or you just need to continue to grow. What do you mean? How do I grow? You need to have specific examples of, hey, I want you to be better at patient communication. For example, when you greet patients, I've watched you, and you do not establish any eye contact. You keep your eyes on the computer and you don't engage with the patient. That needs to change. I need you to establish eye contact. I need you to smile. Heck, stand up even to greet them. That introduction is really important to our practice.
So I'm just going to, again, give you a hard time with this and say, I think if I didn't have you, I would avoid all of these conversations, just because I could either see myself going, I'm going to upset you and you're going to get defensive, or you're going to argue with me about something, and am I going to be able to sustain the conversation without me being the one to back down? I think, and whether this is true or not, but this is what I believe oftentimes. But I do feel like a lot of times male doctors can get away with this, but if a female doctor says it, we're opening a different can of worms. And so what do you have suggestion-wise?
There's absolutely a gender difference here. And I'm glad you brought it up, because anytime I'm recommending a conversation like this to one of my female clients, it is much more complex for them, because there's that turmoil of, oh my gosh, what are they going to think if I lay down the law like this? So there is a difference in the way that employees receive that type of feedback from a male and female doctor. But to me, we cannot avoid these conversations. And sometimes I think female doctors create their own problems in avoiding these conversations, or having the conversation and making it too soft and flowery. They actually are just making the matter worse. And again, they're trying to navigate this conversation in a way that we still like each other at the end of it. And I just think that, yes, it's one thing to be liked by your team. It's another thing to be respected by your team. And liking can come and go. And as much as I want every female and male practice owner to be liked by their team, that isn't always possible. As long as there's respect there, then it can be a good working relationship. So there's a lot of times that I'm pushing my female clients to have a very direct conversation. One of my sweet, sweet ladies that I just had a phone call with recently, we were talking about this issue, and she is syrupy sweet, precious. And she was struggling with having to lay the law down for one of her employees who was essentially refusing to do what she asked her to do. And so she had to draw the line and say, if you do not do this, you're in turn resigning from your position. And that was a very hard conversation for her. She's not had to do that before. But we think about the consequence of her not doing that. She keeps an employee on her team that doesn't respect her authority, that doesn't abide by what the doctor has asked her to do. And then my client, the doctor, is constantly in turmoil over this person. Life is too short to retain that person on the team or to not have this type of conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So have the conversation. They need to have feedback, and it needs to be direct, and you need to document it. Then, to me, I always call that the litmus test. Can this person improve or not? We don't know that if we haven't done a good litmus test. If we've been fuzzy about it, then we're going to get fuzzy results. If we've been clear and direct, then you watch that person. Okay, I told her very clearly that I want you establishing eye contact, smiling. Now you watch. Did she do it? Did she do it once and then went back to her old ways? Did she do it for 2 days and then she stopped doing it, went back doing her thing? Or has she done it with some consistency? Okay, look at that. She received feedback, she implemented it, and she's doing it now. Okay, test number 1. Now there's going to be multiple other things that come up where you're going to have to keep giving her that direct feedback, and you just keep testing to see if she can improve. As long as somebody can listen and improve, I think they're worth keeping. If they engage in that conversation and you've been clear and they're inconsistent with improvement, that's a maybe. But I will say most of those end up not working out. It's the ones that listen and can improve, that show consistent improvement. It doesn't mean perfection. It just means that you can tell they're trying to make that improvement.
Well, I think this goes back to an episode we had 2 or 3 episodes ago that was, again, is it a ceiling issue or is it an attitude issue? And so really trying to tease that out is, I think, what I've always been, I find very challenging. Yeah. And going, have I given you enough opportunities to try to change? And or do you bring something else that's super valuable and I can overlook this?
Yeah. There's another thing that comes up here that I think is worth bringing up. So we're kind of talking more performance, right? Like, is this person, the checklist that we had of her ahead of time where it's like, okay, good. She checks 8 out of the 10 boxes. Let's try her out. She gets in and performance is inconsistent. We coach them. She improves. Performance is where we want it to be. But I can't tell you how many times that it's not just a performance thing. There are so many times it's a personality thing. That it's like what I saw in that interview process and even in the first couple months is actually not who I got as an employee. Some people can fake it for a pretty good period of time. And then we kind of see with full-blown eyes that, oh no, she is not sweet Sally. She's actually
menacing Mary.
Saint Mary. That's a good one. Oh man, and sometimes your team members can spot it before you can.
Oh, I think that's almost always the team spots it first.
Yeah. So then you start to hear these little, it may not even be like, oh gosh, Sally ain't gonna work. She said this and she did. It may just be little subtle things that your team says like, oh, did you happen to overhear Sally in team meeting when she said this? That was interesting, wasn't it, Doc? And you're like, what was interesting about that? I don't get it. So your team members might be trying to give you little warning signs like, this girl ain't working. And so it doesn't always have to be performance. It can be personality as well. Which...
honestly, those go hand in hand with so many things, though. Like,
I know.
I'm thinking of one that every time... I mean, I was probably the first one to want to let her go. Like, every 3 months I was calling you going, okay, she's on my nerves again. But then, like, we'd talk, it would improve, but really at the core of it, it was a personality issue.
Yeah.
And her personality really irritated me. And I think that's where I'm like, I guess, to be fair, there's others that their personality wins me over and they don't perform as well. I'm like, but gosh, shucks, I really do like that person. I connect with that person.
They're so darn likable.
Yes, and everyone else is like, what do you like about her? And I'm like, I don't know. She resonates with me. I think she's funny. And so I think it just, it's just that mix of trying to figure out. And I think I rely a lot on my team for that too, where there are times where I'm like, okay, like you've brought me concerns. She's brought me concerns. Y'all are telling me that we've already talked about this set of concerns. We're not really seeing improvements. What do y'all want to do?
Yeah.
And I let the team kind of decide what they want to do.
Yeah. I do think too, and personality, you're right, personality and performance kind of go hand in hand. I think the person that you're referring to as an example, but also even with a client I was talking to this week that this lady has a great personality and just knows how to kind of wine and dine the doctor and distract. I think is the key word, distract from the fact that she's not doing her job. And so then after a certain point, most positions, it becomes evident that that person is not doing their job at some point. But they've distracted you from seeing that for a long time. So I think the person that you're referring to, again, she talked a good talk, had a great personality, and could just kind of explain things away. And her things weren't obvious mistakes or anything like that. It was just chaos would be the word that I would say would constantly seem to be swirling around her, was just chaos. It's not like there was thankfully your office has such, I would say, ironclad systems that for the most part, she didn't cause damage to the practice.
Someone caught it, but she was creating a lot of work and chaos for the others around her.
Yeah. But then again, she's so darn likable that you just can kind of look past it. Or I think of, so we've got, early on you need to kind of correct and say you need to do this differently and be clear and all that. But also, like when you look at longer spans, do you have clear markers of success for this person? Some positions are easy. Like you think about same period of time, your treatment coordinator. That was kind of in the same vein as this other lady, and she had very clear directives. I was tracking treatment acceptance, I still do, but at that time in particular, we had transitioned treatment acceptance away from a lady who was utterly failing in it, bless her heart, not for lack of effort, she just wasn't good at it. And so we had kind of let that leash go as long as we possibly could, and then had to sever ties with her and brought in this lady to take over that lady's spot. And so I had set up, my goal in bringing this new treatment coordinator on was we need to get treatment acceptance up, and this is your sole task. Figure out how to do it. And so she had very clear directives on what she was to achieve, which was to establish higher treatment acceptance and really good follow-up processes on the back end. And so she was good at one of those, but not consistent with it. So when I say good, she did the task of setting up the follow-ups afterwards, and we worked together to figure out the frequency of those contacts afterwards, the variety of contacts. So she was good at setting up the system. She was not consistent with following through with it. And treatment acceptance did not go up at all. In fact, it diminished a little bit more from our one that really struggled with it. So at the end of the day, no matter how long you've given this person, if they're not fulfilling the role that you have assigned to them, no matter how many times you've talked with them, coached them, said, have you tried this and that, if they're not performing, then you have to cut ties at some point.
And that for me is where I'm like, okay, but what else could they be doing? Like, they're not good at performing this. Is there anything else they could do? Do we need to switch seats in the office? Like, maybe they could get us to this part. Like, they're really good at building a connection with the patient and kind of empathizing and doing all of that. And maybe that's where their role stops and they tag out and somebody else comes in and discusses the financials because this person struggled with finance. Like, can we do that? And ultimately the answer was no. But I think that for me is where I'm trying to repurpose. But, I think at that point where I've missed the mark many times is not really listening. I'm the one who's kind of been like, well, but I can see why. And in this case, wherever. And whether that was if I like the person or whether it was my fears of going, oh my God, I got to start over and like go through the interview process that I really don't want to do. So I think those have been things that have contributed to me dragging out the process too long.
Yeah.
But
I think you bring up a good point, though, that if they're not excelling in their role, we really should consider, can we swap seats? Can we, before we actually move to termination? And sometimes you and I have been in this spot quite a bit in your practice where we reach a point where we're like, okay, this person's not excelling in her role. could we shift her here? But the person that's there is doing a decent job, or we imagine the person that's in that role doing the failing team member's role, and we're like, oh no, she couldn't do that. And then essentially you might be down to having to pick who are we keeping. It may be that you literally can't move that person around without taking somebody else's job. And so thinking through those scenarios as well is, you should always consider before you fire them if they can fit in any other role.
So I would guess then those are good benchmarks, if you will. Like, number one, make sure you're clear on the role that you hired that person for, and that you have set clear, like, tasks or goals of what they need to be achieving.
Yeah.
And then, so if they're falling short in that, then that really should be kind of the writing on the wall, going, okay, well, I hired you to be an RDA, but you keep cone cutting these x-rays. Like, it's just not going to work. Or you keep putting the handpiece in the, shaker thing. Like, we've already talked about this 10 times. Like, that's not going to work. And so if that's the case, but she's super sweet, she's the one who shows up on time, she really wins over the trust of the parents. Okay, well, could you be our treatment discussing person? Because your technical skills aren't quite there, but you are really good at engaging with the parent. Maybe we're going to transition you to be more of a treatment talk person. And then you engage with people. Maybe if we have the budget and time for maybe your marketing some.
Yeah.
And then if you come back at me and go, nope, I want to be an RDA, that's what my license is in, that's the career path I want, or that's fine, I don't mind marketing, but I, really, you're saying marketing's only 8 hours of the week, but I need 15 hours. At that point, that might be very objective, going, okay, well, check box this.
Yeah.
But I think if it's somebody where you're like, God, your personality just really grates on my nerves, I'm firing you. But then you did coach them on how to take x-rays, and they did. They were able to learn x-rays. Then maybe that's your benchmark to say, okay, I got to figure out how to, short of them, unless they have something else that, they irritate you, but they're also driving patients away too. Okay, so how are we benchmarking that to go, well, you made 5 patients happy, but you made 5 unhappy. That's not good enough in our practice. Yeah. So it's like, how do you have goals, benchmarks that are very transparent, so that they and you can see, like, okay, you're really not hitting the mark here. And if you're really not hitting the mark, then is there another mark we could create for you?
Yeah.
And then if there's really not, then that's where it's time to go.
Yeah. Agree completely with that. The clarity of that. And again, it's super helpful for the practice owner or leader to have that. It's helpful to know, like, it's not just a feely thing. This is objective things that we're looking at, but it is equally as helpful to that employee. They need to know what they're aiming for, because they could be tiring themselves completely out working on the wrong thing or doing it the wrong way. So that clarity is equally important for both parties, quite honestly.
I also like what you said about the frequent check-ins with somebody, because I think one that can open the door for things that if you are saying things and they're like, oh, I had no idea that I was supposed to be XYZ, and you're like, what? So at least it can bring out those. Or if they say something, they're like, well, because I'm supposed to be doing this, and you're like, what? No, you're not. You're supposed to be doing it this way. So it gives those opportunities. I think, moreover, too, it's when I say to somebody in our practice, we had one recently, she's been a relatively new hire, she's doing beautifully. Well, we've been looking to hire for this other office. You were in my office the other day. I said, hey, can you check on new girl? Because I haven't really checked in on her in a while, because we haven't had any feedback for her, because she's doing great, which is, kind of refreshing, kind of odd, but she's really, like, I'm not seeing anything that she's really bumbling up here. She's actually doing well. And so, but will you check in with her? Because I don't want to just assume she's doing well, because I have been distracted with this other office stuff. And you said she was really funny because she was super quiet, and her thought was, she finally admitted to you that she thought she was about to get fired because we were hiring, and you had to go, no, we've got another practice. What kind of staff for? What's wrong with you, right? But that was just like her mindset, and we would have never guessed that.
Yeah.
But for me, so that's always my point when I always tell newer hires and go, if we've had to pull you in multiple times, and you've seen mine and Bethany's face a lot of times, then I would say that's a problem. And so, because sometimes we do get into where, I don't know, sometimes we can be a little fluffy and sugar-coaty, and sometimes we can be a little harsh. Either way, it's funny to me how people interpret those. And I can think of one that we had to let go, a couple of years ago, and she just really didn't see this coming. And I'm like, that's odd, because we're having every 10 days, we're having these hour-long conversations with you, where it's finally where I was just like, you know what, I do love her, but I can't do this anymore. But she was completely caught off guard. And I'm like, that's weird, because in the last 3 months, there's probably at least 8 conversations we've had between Bethany and I. 8 in 3 months, corrective conversations. Why would you not think that this was coming?
Yeah.
And I think even in one of those, like maybe conversation number 4, I was like, dude, if we don't see improvements, like I'm going to be making changes in staffing.
Yeah.
And so somehow that still didn't register. And so I just start going that, at least for me, I can at least go, did we do our due diligence, or did we really catch you off guard? And I think the frequent check-ins, you can go, no, we checked in this many times.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just Bethany. It was a variety that we tried. But really, then I go back and I say, 8's far too many. That's on me for not listening sooner. But I think here that those should be your benchmarks. Do you have kind of benchmarks for tasks and proficiency for the role, and also cultural meeting skills? Have you showed up late too many times? Have you skipped these meetings? Are you always the first one to leave and somebody else gets stuck with the last patient, et cetera, et cetera? Like, have you been like, oh yes, I will, I check the emails, but it's been 2 days since you've checked the emails and patients have been calling, waiting for an answer. That to me is both a proficiency problem and a culture problem. Yeah. And we're not going to keep doing that. We've already had 2 conversations. Third time, like, yeah, you've been here a year and a half, but maybe it's time to go. Like, for some reason, you don't seem to catch that this is important to us.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to raise the level of intensity in that conversation. I can think of some conversations I had just a few months ago where it's in a larger practice, and there were 2 team members on the business team that were kind of buddy, and they themselves were kind of creating this subculture within the business team that was not acceptable. It was not flowing with the overall flow and culture of the practice. But me, from a consulting standpoint, I was like, we can't fire both of them because that's severely crippling. And so we did our series of conversations of like, hey, we're going to tweak this, do this, and do this task instead of this now, since this hasn't been done well. And so we did a lot of that. We moved seats. We moved them to different locations in the practice. Like, hey, actually, why don't you sit at this computer now instead? Because we thought maybe separating some would be helpful. Anyway, it was a long, long process. And it still came down to we had not changed that culture with the 2 of them. And so I can think of the last conversation that I had with both of them individually, and I hedged my bets, and I told the doctor, I said, this is how I'm going to approach the conversation. Are you okay with that? And he was like, yep, go for it. And I told both of them, I said, it's a problem. It's a problem. Here are all the things that are a problem. And by the way, I've got it documented here. We've already started looking for your replacement. Now, you can surprise me. I would love for you to surprise me.
I'd be appreciative if you surprised me.
Please surprise me and just turn this around, and don't put me in a position of having to replace you. But just so you know, I want this meeting is really to say these are all still the deficiencies, and if they're not corrected immediately, you're going to be replaced, and we're already looking for your replacement. So it was a game of chicken. When you're to me, it was a game of chicken. I was like, one of them's going to improve. I can lose one. I can't lose 2. I think one of them's going to improve. I didn't know which one. but I had a feeling one of them was going to improve. And sure enough, that is what happened. One of them completely improved and kind of distanced herself from the other one, and the other one continued to decline. And
she didn't leave? I thought she would have left on her own.
Nope. We did end up having to terminate her from the team, but it made it clear who should stay. Because sometimes you're just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we have to elevate the feeling in that conversation so that the person knows, no, this is serious, by the way. Like, to the point that we're already looking for your replacement. And again, that is not uncomfortable. I mean, that is not a comfortable conversation. That's very uncomfortable. But sometimes you just got to know, do they have that ability to level up? Are they not registering the seriousness of this? Insert that. Give them a chance. Give them a chance to prove themselves. And so sometimes we do have to make it very, very clear that this is serious. I think of the lady that you're talking about that we had so many conversations, intense. I remember the last couple conversations, I was not myself in those conversations. I snapped back at her. I rolled eyes. I gave her a really hard time in those meetings because I was personally so frustrated with her. And I was tired of the excuses. And so I was nipping all those, and that is not me in meetings. And so, but even that, she didn't fully register, oh, things are bad. So sometimes we think we're communicating, this is bad, and we haven't really communicated that without bluntly saying, this is a problem, to the point that it could cost you your job.
Ew, yucky. So yeah, I think those are the takeaways, I guess, is have some benchmarks, have some clarity on where your boundaries are and what is not going to fly, and try to stick to that.
Communication.
Yeah.
Clear litmus test. So yeah, you got to know. You got to know whether this person is it or not, and that only happens with a lot of uncomfortable conversations, unfortunately. So, fun stuff.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.